Everything Sequel is brought to you by Slaters 50/50. It's burgers, Jim, but not as we know it. Jim! Jim! Everything Sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast, the Back to the Future edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I'm here in Pacific Beach, baking in the closet once again. With me, as always, is the magnificent, the wonderful Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hi, Tom.
I think he took his wallet.
That guy gets so much screen time.
Hey, he's like the only new character in that film.
Yeah, in a span of like 2 minutes. That guy is just all over the place. Well, here we are. We're talking about the Back to the Future sequels today. But of course, first, we are going to have to rank these movies, and we're going to have to declare them good or bad. I'm super excited for Back to the Future and its sequels. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I really am. I think there's a lot of firsts in here for us. It's like the first time we're examining the last two movies in a trilogy.
All right.
And it's a sequential trilogy, so we're like, we're following a continuing story through these films, which is something that's not happened yet for us. Mm-hmm. And they're all made by the same director, so that's another.
Yeah. That's something unique to the Back to the Future series. That doesn't always happen.
No, and I can only think of a handful of other examples where that happens. So it's interesting to see these movies they work as a body of work, but we're removing the head. So how's that going to work analytically?
Right. Well, of course, we're talking about Robert Zemeckis and his 3 movies, Back to the Futures 1, 2, and 3. The first Back to the Future is sort of a seminal movie for myself. In my mind, it just didn't get better than Back to the Future when I first saw it. How about you?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we have to take into account. I mean, we try not to talk too much about the original. But these films talk about the original, so we have
to. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so let's go ahead and get into the meat of it. Let's rank these movies. Which one do you like better of the sequels, 2 or 3?
I'm gonna go 2, 3.
All right. This was difficult for me.
Yeah.
But I'm going 3, 2.
Good. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. I feel like on a different day I could have done that too.
Yeah, I feel like most people think the second movie is the better movie. Like I feel like the third movie gets shortchanged quite a bit as not being as good. But I just think that movie's delightful. I love it.
Well, it's interesting. I think for years and years, I accepted it as a rule of thumb that the third movie was better. But rewatching them for these purposes, I kind of flipped.
Okay, interesting. Well, we're going to have to talk about that, obviously. Now, are we both in agreement that both these movies are good?
No.
Oh.
See, this is where it gets difficult.
So you're literally saying that 3 is a bad movie?
No, I think this is very complicated.
Oh, now I'm fascinated. Oh my God! Wait, what's happening? Holy shit! Explain yourself.
I'm gonna say I think 2 is a bad movie, and 3 is a good movie.
Yeah. And yet you like 2 better than 3. Do I have that right?
In the series, yeah. Against each other, yes.
Fascinating. All right.
I don't quite. Well, I feel like I'm trying to illustrate a greater point by doing this. I'm not quite sure what that point is just yet.
Neither does our audience, I'm sure. I know I'm lost. There are things that bother me about the second movie, but I still think it's a good movie. It's just too much fun to say that it's a bad movie. So I declare each movie, 2 and 3, as good movies.
All right.
All right. Well, let's talk about Back to the Future 2, 1989. This movie had a $40 million budget and grossed 119 here in the good old US of A, and 346 million worldwide. This is a movie that made money.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because when I used to watch this as a kid, I used to watch the trilogy, pretty much back to back. I in fact watched it back to back in a movie theater once as well, like in one night. Which
nice.
is a hallucinatory experience, I can tell you. You never need to see another lightning strike in your life.
Right, you're covered.
Yeah, because what struck me as the first surprise I had was that this is 1989. And the original movie is, 85?
85, yeah.
So that's a big, big gap.
Right,
and
the biggest
I always
reason...
that all three movies were made back-to-back, but only 2 and 3 were.
Correct.
And, I remember reading the producers saying that the final scene of Back to the Future, everyone assumed it was trying to set it up for a sequel, but they claimed they just considered it a joke.
Yeah.
Like a joke ending.
Right.
I mean, my first reaction to that is I call bullshit on that. But then when you realize that it was like there was a 4-year gap, and when you realize some of the problems that ending causes for the beginning of Back to the Future 2,
really messes it up. I mean, that's one of the things that just drives me nuts about Back to the Future 2 is the ending to Back to the Future, which is a fantastic ending.
It is, yeah.
For a single movie.
Yeah.
But once you take a next step and decide to make a sequel, it causes all kinds of story problems.
Well, yeah, and that's where we start. They do a shot-for-shot reconstruction of that sequence, and
but the actors choose to do it differently.
Right? Yeah, they punch in new line readings.
Yeah, which makes it strange. It makes it kind of there's a disconnect there.
There is, yeah. So they have to put in these new because So it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder whether they weren't angling for a sequel and it really was a joke. I'm kind of on the fence about that.
Well, Zemeckis, my understanding of what I've read was Zemeckis and I think his name's Robert Gale.
Yeah, Bob Gale. Yeah.
They did not have an interest in making sequels, but the studio very much did, and then they both decided, well, we'd rather be in control of it ourselves than let them do anything with it, and so that's why we'll do it. And then the long wait was because Zemeckis was making Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Mm.
So
everybody I don't know why that movie would take so long to make.
Right. One interesting story I read was that Michael J. Fox didn't even realize that they were going to make sequels until he was watching the original on VHS, and they had added something at the end of the tape that said, the story will continue or something like that. And he had to call agents and say, so are we making more movies?
Oh,
and I should be in it, should I not? Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I always thought it was bullshit. It was just a bullshit thing that movie producers say. But yeah, I think like when you watch, because 2 and 3 are made back to back, and that really shows they really work together as a unit.
Yes.
And 1, 2, and 3, they speak to each other, but they there's a lot of retconning that has to go on for us to get into Back to the Future 2.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about the beginning. We've kind of talked about that disconnect.
Yeah.
You have that idea of it feels kind of like a serial, like a serial kind of movie or program. It picks up right where it left off, and we're going into the future. What do you think? Robert Zemeckis is kind of famous for saying he didn't, never really wanted to have to go into the future because movies that predict the future always get it wrong. So, It's supposed to be the year 2015, and of course, they overshot it a bit.
Yeah, in some respects, they get a lot of incidental details right. The Cubs' victory, the
only 1 year off.
Interestingly, the proliferation of sequels into endless franchises, the return of 3D.
Yes.
But I wonder, if you just keep throwing stuff at the future, some of it's going to stick to the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. Some things fall a little flatter, like gentlemen wearing 2 ties
Right.
as part of their wardrobe choice.
Well,
kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think you see, this is why I struggle with this movie, because there's so much that I can't make my mind up about whether it's a good or a bad choice. Like, part of me thinks
Okay, so tell me about that.
Making it like making the future a nostalgia, having a nostalgia for the 80s and Cafe 80s and these antique stores is a really good idea, because then you avoid that problem that Zemeckis talks about predicting the future. But in the other hand, you're regurgitating so much from the original movie that it seems like a little bit of a cop-out as well.
Right. Because you were really upset about Jaws 2, and it just kind of repeating the sequel, or rather repeating the original.
Yeah. Well, and then this is it, and every time that they reuse footage from the original movie, or they call back to a gag from the original movie, or kind of repeat a setup or something like that, I have the same internal conflict where I think, is this just a kind of like a souped up version of of this kind of regurgitating the original in the sequel, or is it self-aware? Is it actually making?
I think it's really
that?
Yeah, I think it's really self-aware. And that's the one thing that I really like about Back to the Future 2, is it's extremely self-aware and just filled with, sort of delightful jokes. When Marty and Doc go into the future with Jennifer, I might add, which is, I think one of the things that doesn't work.
Well, Bob Gale always said that, and there's even a line in the movie where Marty says, "Then what did you bring her for?"
Exactly right, and you can kind of see all the problems in this movie. They present themselves in the script itself, like they comment on it, which is interesting. But having said that, when the entire chase sequence happens out of the Cafe 80s diner, and it's just a repeat of the exact same chase we had in the first one, it's still delightful. And you even have Biff saying, "There's something really familiar about all of this."
Yeah.
And that sort of self-awareness, I think, works.
That's enough, but I am glad it's there. It's fun. I mean, it's it's nice that these movies do speak to each other, that they don't let that stuff pass. Because that was my big problem with Jaws 2. It's like we're acting as if none of this ever happened before, when it happened exactly the same way before.
Well, everybody but Brody.
Well, yeah,
Brody
but he's doing the same. He's got the same shtick too,
right?
And he's not really. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting in that respect, but actually, I mean, that the first half of the movie leans less on the original than the second half of the movie. So kudos for that. But we don't have a lot of kind of original material. We have a kind of everything is a variation or a spin on what we've already seen.
Well, and the one thing that always kind of bothers me about the second one is, they are often making choices that clearly sort of develop into a problem that didn't need to be a problem. Like, we needed to get to Marty's and Jennifer's, current home in 2015.
Right.
But the only way to do that is to put her outside next to the garbage, outside of the car. I
gotta say, I mean, we talk about,
and there's just no reason to not keep her in the car. Like, why?
We've not even addressed the political side of that, which is like how badly women and minorities are treated in these movies.
Correct.
And I made a note that between what happens to Jennifer and Mrs. McFly in the course of this movie, women are just passed back and forth as objects between men.
Yeah, completely.
They are like props. At least in this movie. Maybe Clara does something to change that, but not much. It's still, it's as bad, and race is even worse, I think.
Yeah. Once again, when we revisit movies from the 80s, we find all kinds of problems. And I might include the clock tower. Why the fuck does that clock tower need so much goddamn money?
Yeah.
It's broken. Doesn't it just need signatures to say, hey, let's keep it and not bury it?
See,
at any rate,
go ahead. I spent the entire time I was watching this most recent time thinking, are they trying to say that history doesn't change, like nothing moves on in history? Because that's a great point. I'm all with that. But it's it just seems to be an excuse to cast the same actors again, to avoid having to come up with a new idea for something,
and to have bits.
And to have bits, and so I sort of wonder, like, at what price does this kind of does this idea that we can move on 50 years in time and everything's still the same, like it's a good sci-fi science fiction kind of idea, but it's also an excuse for a lot of raking over old ground.
Yeah, and you can even think about the original to that, sort of the butterfly effect. If George McFly really did, give a good clocking to Biff, would they be in that house that Marty grew up in the whole time? That kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So at any rate, we're just getting started with Back to the Future 2, everybody. And give us a moment. We're going to take a quick little break, and we'll be right back to talk more about this fantastic, silly movie. Right after this. Look, people, we're living in strange times. We know that, don't we? Of course we do. People don't even know what to do with themselves. We're getting stir crazy. Well, get outside and get yourself some great food, I say. You need to go to Slaters 50/50 in Point Loma's Liberty Station. It's time to treat yourself to booze, to beer, to burgers, and more. They have their full menu, people. Their full menu, I say. How many restaurants do you know that are doing that? Most places are doing a quarter of their menu, probably. Some might be doing a half. Maybe a few have got 3/4 of a menu. But Slaters 50/50 has their full menu, including their signature 50/50 patty. It's half ground beef. It's half ground bacon. It's 100% delicious. What more could you possibly ask? Worried about social distancing? Well, it is in place, people. Tables are separated, and the staff will always be seen wearing masks. You're out of excuses. Get off your keister and come on down to Liberty Station's own Slaters 50/50. Indoor dining available. Outdoor dining available. Bring the family. Bring your dog. Come enjoy the normal again. Good day to you. I said good day. And we're back. We're here talking about Back to the Future 2. We were talking about the ways that it is successful and is not successful. Tom, one of the things I want to talk about, because I think the one thing that this movie does so well is, we're in 3 time periods. We're in 2015, we're in 1985, we're in 1955, and it's all fully realized to me, each one of those, Say what you will about the believability of the future, the hellscape of the current 1985, but they are fully realized, and I think that's one of the things that makes the movie so successful. How about you?
I think that's actually one of its biggest problems. Sorry to be Siskel to your Ebert there. The big problem I have with this movie is how segmented it is. It's like we're in the future. and then we get out of the future, and then we're in the alternate timeline, and then we go back to the 50s, and it's sort of like it's there's the lack of coherency is something that kind of troubles me a little bit about how this works. Sometimes
Well, what
it
do you
just
mean?
feels
And
like
in what way is it not coherent?
well, because it just we're out of the future in like 30 minutes,
Right. Okay.
and that and then we're back in post 2016 America, also known as the 1985 alternate timeline.
Yeah, right. The 1985 alternate timeline, in which, by the way, Biff is the 1985 Biff is one of my notes was I found a thing where he based him on Trump.
Yes.
On Donald Trump.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's using Trump as the kind of Mr. Potter of 80s America.
Yeah.
Which again is something else that the Back to the Future got right about the future.
Correct. I take a little issue though with the lack of coherence. At least from this aspect, Carl Sagan says this is the best time travel movie of all time.
Right.
Because of
what
the
does he say about the
consequences.
photographs that disappear?
Well, I'm not sure he commented specifically on the photographs that disappear.
And they double down on all that kind of hokey stuff, which is all for the audience's benefit, and that's fine. But
yeah, I mean, come on, how can you get mad at it? Don't be a dick.
I know I'm not mad at it. It's just it's I think it's interesting that the movie just goes full pelt with its choices, and I do like that aspect about it. But I just feel we're constantly, to use a driving term, we're constantly changing gears, and sometimes I think those gear changes are a little bit clunky.
Okay. Well, that I agree with.
Yeah.
I think from a writing standpoint, there's a lot of just messy shit in this movie. You know, the idea that Biff follows them in a taxi cab, gets into the DeLorean, manages to figure out how the DeLorean works.
Yes.
Comes back, like all of that. And the other thing that really bothers me more than anything about this movie is nobody notices anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Marty's in the back seat of the car. He's talking on a walkie-talkie at full voice, and yet somehow Biff can't hear him. He's jumping off, down a flight of stairs, and Biff doesn't hear him. Like, the amount of shit that goes on in this movie where people just are oblivious.
And,
is
they
troublesome.
sort of cover themselves because they do, like, as with their, their own...
but it's so weak,
It is self-aware. They do reference their own plot holes. I think the great one, which I'm sure we'll go back to, is Doc Brown sort of saying, "Oh, Biff went back to this exact date on 1955. Is it? Maybe it's the nexus of the universe, or it might just be.
It might just be an incredible coincidence."
And it's a nice, you realize that the screenwriters are sort of, they're cognizant of their own plot holes, even if they seem powerless to do much about them.
Right.
Which again is like it's an argument that they never really wanted to make the sequel.
Right.
I think the whole second half of the movie shows that they didn't want to make this sequel because you're really sort of you're not adding anything new to the pot,
except camera angles.
Well, and that might be another area where Back to the Future 2 is ahead of the game. I mean, it's like it's the DVD bonus material. Watching the movie from an alternate angle has basically the second half.
For
of the movie.
me, that makes the 1955 stuff all worth it because it's so. To me, it really is truly fascinating to see it all from different angles and with the current Marty.
Oh, I find it tiresome.
Oh, I find it very interesting. I like all of that.
I don't need to know that they were like hit with sandbags. That doesn't add anything to my feelings about the first movie.
You would prefer that they got hit by something else?
Well, no, but if there was like some sort of revelation, other than that, I feel it'd be kind of worth doing. But we don't. In a way, they're trying to preserve. to play both sides, where they're trying to preserve the integrity of the first movie by not retconning anything too much. But then then it's like, well, why make the second part of the movie that adds absolutely nothing? I think the time that they actually succeed with that is the ending of the movie. We're skipping ahead a little bit, but Marty running back. You see the end of the first, or a climactic scene from the first movie, and then
Oh, this is like the greatest ending ever. It's so fantastic.
Which is that Marty runs straight back in.
Yeah.
After having just left, and that's
pure gold.
But before that, it's just a bunch of the principal reading, drinking whiskey and reading Penthouse or Sexy Magazine or whatever it's called.
Well, what do you think about the addition of Elizabeth Shue?
I remember watching these movies back to back, and I definitely thought that they were casting up in terms of the actress from the original. Having done that, they do so little with her that it's beyond insulting.
Well, and this is the problem with. And you referenced it earlier, the idea of why'd you bring her then?
Yeah.
Because
well, they never wanted her in the car.
They didn't want her in the car, but she had to be in the car.
Right.
Because she was in the car at the end of the first movie.
Yeah.
But there are moments, with what little she has, I just love what Elizabeth Shue does. When she has a move where she gets into the closet where she's looking around that just delights me every time I see it. And when she sees herself and faints, I made a note best faint ever. I just I'm old, and she cross-eyed and falls down, and Doc catches her. It's just fantastic.
And we also learn how good Michael J. Fox is at this kind of proto nutty professor playing all members of his own family. I feel like I'd rather see that again and again instead of Eddie Murphy doing it again and again.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean the performances in this movie are top notch. But is it time to talk about Crispin Glover?
The fact that he's not in it at all.
And yet they're trying to make out that he is still in this movie.
Yeah. Fascinating, because I did not know this until I was researching for this podcast. I had no idea that it wasn't him.
It's a very ethical gray area.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Crispin Glover was not being offered the same amount of money as Lea Thompson, and apparently their roles were going to be about the same size in the movie. And there was some back and forth, and he had asked for this, and they said no, and he also didn't apparently like the ending of the first movie, because he thought that the McFlys became too material, so he wanted consent, he wanted story approval, apparently. And they said no, and he said fine. And then they tried to get him back with a little more money, and apparently he got new representation or something like that. And it all fell apart because they asked for more money. And,
he got that agent that George Lazenby had that told him to leave the Bond franchise.
That told him to leave, yeah, exactly. So he wasn't in the movie, and they just did another actor and used...
Jeffrey Wiseman.
Yeah, they used face moldings and gave him makeup that made him look like Crispin Glover. He ended up suing the producers and winning. Yeah,
it's unthinkable now. But
it really is.
They were trying to con you into thinking Crispin Glover was still in the movie, and it's only in the last few years that I've realized that they did this. It's really shady. It's a really shady move.
I mean, it's strange, isn't it? And it's funny because when you connect it to the idea of the first movie, they shot I think a full 6 weeks with Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And they just thought it wasn't funny. It wasn't bringing the funny in the way they want, so they recast it and reshot the whole thing. And it just, when you consider that, it was like there's a lot of funky shit happening on the making of these movies.
And there's definitely there's precedent to deal with it in a way that isn't so much about deception and, you know, denying someone, you know, their intellectual property. On the Godfather, when Richard Castellano wouldn't return as Clemenza, exactly the same situation. He wanted he and his wife needed to have approval over the story and every line of dialogue.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but they replaced him with a similar kind of character who was just completely different, Frank Pentangeli. But he was playing the same role, but it was an entirely different characterization, and that's definitely what they should have gone with here. Mm-hmm. However, they did that. I mean, we have at the end of the movie, we have a brand new George McFly. I think the audience would accept a different, if not, similar actor playing him.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So I think it's another reason in which this movie kind of suffers a little bit, because they didn't get that full complement of cast back, which, as we already know, having done this series, is like the death warrant for any sequel.
Right. And it changed the script. I mean, they had to change the whole script based on his not being in it.
But I mean, and we've talked about this before in terms of Superman's mother as well. I do like the fact that Biff comes to the center of the story in a way that he perhaps wouldn't before.
And the funny thing to me in rewatching all of these movies is it occurs to me that, what's his name? Thomas F. Wilson?
Yes.
He might be the best goddamn actor in the whole series.
Huh.
He's
interesting.
so
He's great.
good in these movies.
He's really wonderful.
He's
fantastic. He's asked to do a lot of different character types.
Yeah.
Within this one kind of body. It's really interesting performance.
Oh, it's so much fun to watch. I just think he's fantastic.
Yeah, no, and it's the cast is just on fire throughout. I mean, I started this by quoting like a guy who's a bit part who just says, "I think they took his wallet," and he just says that he has 2 lines in the movie, and he's completely unforgettable.
Yeah. They got more out of that guy.
And he's the only new character. I wasn't joking when I said he is the only new character in the film.
They wrung so much out of that sponge for just the the same line basically repeated several times.
Yeah, which is kind of a metaphor for what the movie is, and I think it does that. I think it's totally on the fence as to whether it made the right choices to not offer something completely new. I think you can argue the third one does that. It offers something distinct.
It does. It's a completely different movie. So while we're wrapping up here, we're talking a lot about this movie. I really need to understand you, Tom.
Yes.
Why is this a bad movie that you think is the better sequel?
Okay, so the reason I think this is did I said it was a bad movie, right? Okay.
You said it was
the
bad.
reason I think it's a bad movie is because it's stitched together. It's three, there's no continuity. There's no, to my mind, plausible continuity between these 3 little vignettes that make up the movie. And that makes it to me feel like a stopgap. It's like, well, we'll go here and we'll go there and then we'll come back to where we were originally. And I just think that's not a film to me. If it was made today, it would be like a I don't know what you call it, like a internet prequel or something.
Mm-hmm. All the things you're saying, I agree with. And I agreed with in 1989. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's such a stopgap movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it nearly as much as I do now on the first viewing.
I agree with that, too. The reason I think it's the better sequel is...
Yeah, talk to me about that, buddy.
Well, hopefully that'll become clear when we do the third movie, but just as a kind of preview of that, I think it's because it's less of a novelty idea.
Okay.
It's it's a better sequel because one, it's doing the work of a sequel, and it's doing it in a kind of self-aware way where it's commenting on what it's doing while it's doing that. And so I think that makes it a better sequel. You know, we did Jaws last time, and Jaws, you know, is talked about in the movie. I think when Marty goes into the future, Jaws 19 is playing in 3D. And so it's very clear that that this movie is trying to think about the place of sequels in cinema.
Right.
I just don't think that amount, and so I think it's a more interesting experiment that is more artistically satisfying
that you think failed. But okay.
But it's not. But it doesn't amount to a film. I think this would make a great straight to video piece. You know, like piecing together one. You know, the different ends of the trilogy. But it just doesn't. It doesn't speak to me as a film. I like when it's over. I was like, okay, so we got through that. Let's get on to the
Let's
next
get
part.
to the end of the story. Yeah. That's how I felt when I first saw it. But to me, that's why number 3 is better than number 2.
Well, yeah, but 3, but yes, I think. I think as the other problem is about how 3 doesn't deliver enough in its own right for what it's trying to do that makes it a bad film.
Oh, how dare you!
I feel like part 2 is firing on all cylinders in its weird kind of let's do a self-aware sequel that
in its own haphazard way
that uses let's a twist on the sequel being exactly the same as the original, and let's see in what different ways we can explore that. Then it's firing on all cylinders. I don't think the third movie is the sort of post-classical Western parody that it wants to be.
I don't know that it's trying to be a parody, but of course we're going to get into that on our next episode. You know what's interesting to me? We got to wrap up here. Would you like to hear the filmmakers apparently made taglines for every Jaws movie sequel?
Oh, they did?
That exists in this universe. Would you like to hear them?
I would love to hear them.
So apparently Jaws 3D was a new dimension in terror. We know that Jaws 4 was this time it's personal. Jaws 5 apparently was just business. Jaws 6 was pure pleasure, suggesting a romantic subplot.
Yeah.
Jaws 7 was Cyber Jaws. Jaws 8 was Robo Jaws, a spoof of RoboCop. Jaws 9 featured Chief Brody's grandson assembling a super team of shark hunters. Jaws 10 was man versus shark versus all the terrors of the deep. Jaws 11 took place in outer space. Jaws 12 was a prequel. Jaws 13 was Jaws 12 Part 2, a sequel to the prequel. Jaws 14 had Jaws starting a family. Jaws 15, Jaws battled a Russian shark named Ivan Sharkovsky. And let's see. We had Jaws took a bite out of the Big Apple in Jaws 17, and 50 Scales of Grey, Jaws learns about love from a mysterious stranger.
Some of those are alarmingly close to the sequel that I pitched.
Of course.
I swear I did
goodness.
not know about those before I pitched that sequel. I think it's just, I think robots in outer space, it's going to happen eventually.
It must.
In any franchise, it's going to go robots, aliens, and outer space.
It has to.
Yeah.
It always has to end up in space.
Fast and Furious is going there, I swear.
Oh, yeah. Mark my words, they will be stealing something with a space shuttle soon. All right,
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen. Well, that is it for Back to the Future 2. If you've got a comment, if you think we've missed something, find us on Facebook or the Instagrams or the Twitters. Give us a little shout out and tell us what we missed. For Tom Stewart, my name is Michael Shantz. This is the Everything Sequel podcast. We'll see you next time for Back to the Future 3.
To be concluded.
To be concluded, exactly right.